So members, you're welcome to this other session. In this session, we are going to put our focus on the research process. So we're looking at the research process, and especially for us to see where does research begin from and where does it go, and where do we say now here we have completed our research process. You will see that research begins from 1. Identification of the problem, reviewing literature, then setting the topic of research, and then afterwards we can have our objectives. That's a summary of the first phase, that you need to identify the research problem, then review literature, set the topic, and then also set the objectives in the first phase. So what we are saying here is that identifying a research problem is very fundamental. And where do we actually find a research problem? Problems that are researchable are always occurring in our communities, and our communities are having problems that are keeping on affecting them, that they need to be relieved from these problems through research. So here the researcher has to identify the research problem, and by identifying this research problem, in our research you will see a part which we call stating a research problem, which we call a problem statement. I've always found some students coming to me, here I have this topic, so please, is it a good topic, is it a proper topic? And that is really a big problem itself, because when you start research from a topic, then that research is desktop. We call it desktop research. It is basing on what one has just imagined, yet research has to solve an existing problem so that that problem ceases to exist in the community. So when the problem is to be identified, what researchers do, they go back to the community and find what is actually affecting our people, and could it be in schools, could it be in the classroom, could it be relationship between the instructors, teachers, and the learners, could it be teaching methods, could it be content, can it be in administration, or could it be a curriculum issue? Can it be methods? Could it be collaborations with parents and the community? Involvement in the school affairs? Or it could be an economic issue, or political. So there must be a problem that is realistic in the community that is prompting us to undertake research. When we identify the problem, then we can state our problem in, and this problem should have the 3 parts. In characteristics of the problem statement, you see that the first part of the problem statement is what should be. That's the ideal part. The ideal part is what should be, what ought to be the normal situation. Now, when we were looking at what actually constitutes a problem, we say a problem, for us to consider that there is a problem, then there should be what is expected to be. For example, a person's normal temperature is expected to be at 37 degrees Celsius. Normal temperature. That's expected. Now, that's the ideal. The ideal is what should be and what is expected to be. But then there is another part which we call the reality. When we go and test the person's temperature, body temperature, and find the person is at 41 degrees Celsius, that's the reality. So we say that the reality is not what is expected, what is the ideal. Then we start to say that there is a problem. Why? Because what it should be is not what is happening. Then there we can see, is there any effect? Possibly this person may be feeling uncomfortable, is not working, is all that, is even the social attachment has been lost, maybe is using even the taste of food and all that. Then we say the problem is affecting. But if then it is happening that raising of temperature to 41 degrees Celsius away from 37 has nothing, like the person is not feeling any issue in life, nothing has changed, then we say it is insignificant, it's not affecting the person, then still it is not a problem. But when it is destabilizing and it has changed, it is changing the way the person's normal situation should be, then we conclude and say there is a problem. So that's what we say. The ideal part of a problem statement has got to have what is expected, what should be. For example, here in the school atmosphere, in the school environment, we say good remuneration of teachers enables them to incline their efforts to improve the performance of learners, according to that Justice 2025. If Justice or SK Justice has said that, possibly he has confirmed that when remunerations were increased, remunerations mean salaries and the rewards to teachers. If they were when they were increased, the teachers increased and inclined their efforts to improving performance of learners. That's the ideal, meaning that if remuneration increase is enhanced, then the teachers' efforts to increasing performance increases. But the real situation here is that teachers in leader are demonstrating and learners are not performing well. This is attributed to low remuneration. That when you go to leader, the teachers there were found demonstrating and then their remunerations were low. That's the reality. It's far away from the other one that good remuneration of teachers enables them to incline their efforts to improve performance. For this situation, which is real, we see that the teachers are their remuneration possibly is lower, and then they are not possibly, even the performance of learners is not going well. That's what is the reality. So when you compare the reality and the ideal, they are not matching. The reality is not the ideal, and the ideal is not the reality. If this person here even added some statistics that 25% of the teachers are the ones that are remunerated well and the other 75 is not, then they would also back up with statistical evidence of the problem. But you will see that now we expect the performance to improve, yet it is not improving. To expect the remunerations to be good, but here they are low. So the reality is not the ideal. What we expect is not what is happening. you phone the person, you expect the person to be happy on the birthday, but here on the reality the person is there crying on the birthday. Then you see that there is really a problem. What is it affecting? It is affecting the celebrations of the day as expected for a birthday. So here we have another effect called if the other section of a problem statement called the effect. A problem statement must reveal that this reality is actually being a reality and is not the ideal. It is actually affecting the community. So learners in rural districts are failing, show the statistics that they are actually not doing well. And teachers are resorting to border riding, that's now the effect. And the other economic activities other than teaching. That if it continues like this, these schools are likely even to close. This is here is a description of the effect of the what? Of the problem. Now this is the first part is if you are to go undertake a research process, the first thing is identifying the problem, which we call the problem identification. After identifying the problem, let's see that now we can review literature about that problem. Literature is reviewed with a purpose. So here you will learn in further sessions, we shall learn in other sessions, we shall create a time of learning what we call literature review. But here in summary, what we call reviewing literature means to read what other scholars have come up with about a related what? Problem or objective. Now, for this case, we would review literature about what could be the situations that can result into low remuneration and that could affect learners' enrollment. What have other scholars written about this? Then there we go on and find the sources of literature. For example, you could review literature from already researched data, people who have researched data. You could also review literature from textbooks, from journals, from articles. You can review literature from other sources such as artifacts or video recordings and audio recordings, from minutes of meetings, from reports made. Reports could be those from the district, from Uganda Bureau of Statistics for the case you boss for Uganda, or any statistical bureau in the country you'll be working in. You can get those facts from there. And other sources of literature that can inform you about about the problem. We review literature to get clarity of the problem, but also to check the intensity of the problem and see earlier approaches that were taken to attempt to solve such a problem, so that you do not take a method or invest resources in solving a problem which was applied and did not work out. So literature will actually inform you that such an approach was used and didn't work out, and the feedback that it gave, so that you devise better means of solving such a problem. Details can be found in literature review sessions. Now, after reviewing literature, you now can identify the characteristics of the problem, those key elements that constitute the problem. And those key elements that constitute the problem are what we call variables, or characteristics that make that the problem. What we call those variables. So then we can state a topic from the problem. So when we are stating this topic, we need to have the two variables. One of the variable is called the independent variable. That's the one that is causing all the other issues to happen. So it is the independent variable, and then also we state the dependent variable. For example, here, the earlier problem we saw was related to teachers' motivation and the students' performance. So this is teacher motivation and students' performance in primary schools, possibly in Uganda or in anywhere. The locale, state the locale in which the problem is. So here we have the independent variable for this case is teacher motivation. Then this student's performance is the dependent variable. It is depending on teachers' motivation. You motivate teachers, you achieve more students' outcomes. You don't motivate teachers, you achieve low students' outcomes. So we call this independent variable teacher motivation. Dependent variable is students' performance. We separate them with a connector word and. Then in primary schools in Uganda, we specify, because topics, when we are stating topics, we state them with a characteristic called SMART. SMART, M stands for being specific. This is S, specific. M is measurable. A is attainable or achievable. R is realistic. And then T is time bound, meaning that a topic should be SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. That's why we are putting it measuring. We can measure the variable, independent variable versus the dependent variable. Then specific, this is looking at teacher motivation, students' performance, and it is in primary schools. We added here in Uganda. Then a case of leader district, Uganda. That's the case. Possibly this research is going to be done in primary schools of leader district, northern Uganda. Good. So this is very important that our topic, when it is stated, should have two variables. Those are characteristics of the topic. At this stage of stating the topic, these are some details you need to know, that the topic should have two variables and also should be SMART. Then 4, check that your the variables in your topic have these two: independent variable. For ours, for this case, it has the teacher motivation. The dependent variable, student this is students, yeah, here, students' motivation. Then you can draw the conceptual framework. Yeah, you will see how to draw a conceptual framework connecting the relationship between these two variables, the independent variable and the dependent variable. Then we shall have, in the conceptual framework, we shall see how to include the constructs there, or the sub-variables. After you have made sure that your topic is qualifying to be a topic which is researchable, then you set objectives corresponding, you set these objectives and then the corresponding research questions. That's the another phase. Here we shall see in practice that objectives come from the conceptual framework, and that each of the constructs in the conceptual framework constitutes an objective. And from each objective, we create a research question. So you'll see that if we have 3 objectives, there should be 3 research questions. You will look at our guidance on how to create objectives, research objectives, and research questions from the conceptual framework. Then we also indicate the significance and the scope of the study. The significance of the study means what relevance will your research have to the community. So that's why your researcher will say the findings of the study will enable education, will enable teachers to improve on, then you state something. The findings of the study will enable head teachers to set remuneration strategies that will enhance either students' performance in that district. Then you can also make significance too. At this stage, the person also creates significance to either planners, policy makers, can also create significances to students and all stakeholders in education. The scope of the study, you will see that there are 3 scopes of study that the researcher has got to indicate at this stage. The content scope, what generally is your research going to capture? What are the boundaries within which your research is to be undertaken? That's one of the scopes called the content scope. Another scope is called the geographical scope, which tells us what is the location within which you're going to sample the respondents. Geographical, where are you going to conduct this research? So you saw there they had indicated somewhere in Lira district, but possibly one could pick a sub-county in Lira where it's going to conduct the research. So you indicate it in the geographical scope, that sub-county, and those schools are going to be in that sub-county. Then they also have the time scope here. Time scope, if you're doing a study, which indicates what is the frame, the time space within which data is going to be extracted or collected. This also captures data which is historical data and also contemporary data or current data. That will tell us that you have seen the scope of the study. So significance here, we saw significance is the relevance of your research to beneficiaries or stakeholders. Then scope can tell us the boundaries within which your research is going to be, involving content scope, geographical scope, and time scope. So in time scope, that's why we said the research will cover a period of, then you state the year it is going to start, and then the year you stopped collecting data. The other step is now, this will need B7, and then this can include here 8 here. You can now select the design to adopt, but at this stage you'll see the summary of what we are looking at here is choosing the study population. Okay, choosing the methods, study population, sample size, and the instruments. That's what we are looking at here. The research methods, study population, sample size, and the instruments. The other stage we were looking at, this other stage we were looking at problem identification, literature review, setting the topic, and then the objective. So the detail is what we were explaining. So it is problem identification, literature review, topic setting, and also objectives, setting objectives. After that is done, then we can now look at choosing the research methods, the population, sample size, and the instruments. Now, at the stage of choosing research methods, one has got to select which research design to adopt. You'll see the various research designs a researcher can adopt. Then after, you choose the suitable research approach. Among the research approaches, you choose the most appropriate or the suitable one, which is either you take qualitative research approach, quantitative, or mixed research approach. At this stage, the researcher must make a decision on which one to adopt. For the case of Nkumba University, a mixed research approach is appropriate. Other universities can also choose between, as the one can be guided. Either it is qualitative, quantitative, or mixed. Universities specify. Then there you choose the what? The population. You see the population is the number of events, the total number of events that a researcher has interest in to study. For this case, the population means that they are primary schools in the data for the previous example. The target population are now those schools that you, particularly from this total, all of these, they are the ones that you aim at studying. Could be schools in that sub-county, but these can be schools in the entire district, but you're studying a sub-county as your target. But usually in the target population, you also look at some of the few schools you can easily access. in the sub-county. So you may not study all the schools in the entire sub-county. You can study the schools which will say from the target population. You can select accessible population, a population you can access. So which is a smaller number from all the schools in the sub-county. Then study those ones as accessible population but part of the target population. Then now you can set sample size. We shall see the practice of this, how to set a sample size. Sample size, now you set who are the participants. Are they teachers going to participate in this study? Or head teachers? Are parents going to be involved? And then you said how many of them of each of the categories. You'll see that is a step. Then here, the other step is you choose the most appropriate sampling techniques to arrive at the right samples. So if you said you're going to sample teachers, how are you going to, which technique, which style are you going to use to select the most appropriate teachers to participate in your study? So you choose the right samples. So you could use some of these either probability or non-probability sampling techniques to choose the teachers or the participants in your study. Still at this stage, for you to select the most appropriate sampling technique, it requires you to look at the various sampling techniques available. You will see when it comes to learning what we call sampling techniques. Then here you also decide and construct the most appropriate data collection methods, or what we call instruments. If you're choosing questionnaires, interviews, observation, focus group discussions, these are document reviews, or you're going to do experiments, you should specify which, if you want to collect data from these samples, from the sample size which you have selected using these sampling techniques, then what are you going to use to capture that data? If it is to decide to use questionnaires, interviews, observation, or any of these, then you can do what? You decide at this stage. Decide on which one will best provide you with the appropriate data. These are constructed, so meaning you develop them, and they are usually, some are printed, so you can administer them to the various respondents to collect the data. 13, this stage, now you can use some to check whether these tools, these instruments here are going to provide you with the right data. There's what we call, you employ data collection controls and the ethical considerations, so that they collect the right data that you can actually base on to draw conclusion. So here you see there is what we call data quality control mechanisms, which we measure by two aspects called validity and reliability of data. So this, to summarize this, we have included here, we are saying that you choose the research methods, the population, the sample size, and the research instruments. Maybe you can also add even sampling what? Techniques, yeah. sampling techniques there at that stage. We say if the researcher that and any stage does not reveal anywhere that their research methods is going to use, doesn't know the population or the sample size, doesn't know which techniques he has used to sampling techniques he has used to, is going to use either to select the most appropriate samples, or even the instruments are not there, then that process the researcher has not yet undertaken it. There is a big question mark to that researcher. Then here we are seeing after that you need to decide on the you need to now undertake data collection. You go to the field and collect data. After that, this data you collect using the other instruments you've set, and from the samples you have indicated. Then there we can go ahead to collect data from them, and after collecting this data, we can do what we call analysis of that data. Then draw conclusion from that data which we have analyzed. Then make recommendations. From each conclusion we make recommendations, and also now we can disseminate that data. Dissemination. However, the detail of it is that when you create the data collection instruments, okay, you want to collect data from the field. We said you need to follow some ethics. So you receive authorization tools for collecting data, such as a letter of all identification documents, so that when you're going to collect this data, people don't chase you with the stones. One asks, where are you coming from? You know I'm coming from Kumba University. What shows that you're coming from there? Just look at me. I'm a university student. Then, so here you have to sell these letters. Usually this letter is an introduction letter introducing you that you're a student there, or you are a member of an organization intending to collect data, and then the topic the topic of your research, and seeking for attention. This letter may not be enough, so they may ask for an ID. Yes, then you show it, then you say okay, yeah. Now what are you saying? Then you can administer those questionnaires, the interviews, you can make observations, and all the instruments you're going to use to collect the data can be now administered. Then now you can collect the data. After collecting this data, we organize the data and analyze it. Analyze the data using the most appropriate analytical data analysis tools. Yeah, you can use data analysis tools to allow you analyze data. These days, some people use SPSS, others are using X, and other data analysis methods can be used to inform you of what are actually the results of your findings. Sometimes we call results of finding. After analyzing, we present results of findings, which we call findings here. That comes after you have analyzed the data which you collected using the data collection tools from the samples. And then these findings, we draw conclusion about each finding. Remember that you will see that findings are analyzed following objectives. Even data is collected following each theme of the objective. Then draw conclusion. Conclusion is drawn from each finding. Then you also make recommendations from the conclusion you draw. You make the recommendation. Still you follow those objectives. Then after recommending, here most scholarly research in universities, most people end here. But others go ahead to add another step here called publication. Publication here between 18 and 19. They add a publication where you publish either an article from your research, you can publish a book from that research, or you can publish in various journals. Then you disseminate your publication, either it's a publication or these findings. You can hold meetings and tell people, you know, we did research and found this, so we need to do this and the other. That's dissemination. You want information to go into the community other than printing the book and keeping it in your drawers. Then it will never be effective unless it is disseminated and shared in conferences, in seminars, and in trainings can be used. So there's a dissemination avenues. Then you can also watch over to see whether stakeholders are implementing the recommendations and the struggles they are undertaking as they are, the challenges they are facing as they are implementing the recommendations. Some researchers in applied research go ahead to monitor and evaluate the performance of the implementation of the what? Of the recommendations, so that they can make further research or improve on some of the recommendations or on the findings. This is mostly where this research can go. But in the summary is what we have indicated there. At this stage, do data collection, analyze data, draw conclusion, make recommendations, and dissemination. Collect the data, analyze it, draw conclusion, make the recommendations, and then disseminate. That's the summary of this detail. One can run through the detail. You cannot avoid to if you are doing a research journey, that process has to be completed. So our last part here is we are looking at the quality of research. Or a research problem. If you are to come up with a research problem, then it should be having these characteristics. So this research problem which you identify should be researchable. and verifiable. If you want to carry out an experiment to prove whether there is God or not, or research to a problem that is cycling around eliminating head teachers from running schools, how schools can be operated without a head teacher. So you set a problem which is really researchable and identifiable or verifiable. So it should also have this theoretical and practical significance. That means that it should have to contribute to improvement of, for example, an educational process. So it should have this practical significance, its contribution to the institutions it is affecting. Then the problem statement must be clear, and thus it should be stated clearly and concisely. If you're stating a problem statement and it's going on 7 pages, then those could be problems statements other than a problem statement. Then when stating the problem statement, we also follow what we call ethics. That's why you not state a problem statement and tell people that you mention the name of the names of people affected, their names, and list them, or the schools affected, their names, and list them. They may not want it. So the aspect of ethics is very key, so that you do not cause psychological damage or effect to the people, to the beneficiaries. And we also see that when you're stating a problem statement, there should be some literature you've read other than guessing out things. So here we see literature has to be reviewed, so that we come up with a study filled with the literature. You cite a report, or you need to have evidence from literature that you're following. Then this research you're undertaking also needs to be attached to a discipline. We call disciplines here, like, for example, education is a discipline, uh, management is a discipline, finance and accounts is also another a discipline, health is a discipline. You need to tell us what discipline it is. It is really hinged around. Otherwise, a problem statement should not be generic. And we also see that it should have, this is we still running emphasis on significance. Practical significance is very key, but should have the potential to improve the status of the people. Then when you're identifying some problems, yes, the a problem which you are going to research, at least it should be within the means. that we can facilitate it, or you can facilitate that the research for that problem. Otherwise, if you are to conduct research and then it is not within the available time frame and the resources available, then that research may not be apt, uh, applicable. One of the students presented a problem statement saying that the problem is in East Africa and has to study the universities in East Africa, trying to study all the universities in East Africa, and you are going to conduct this research in 1 year. Possibly a person needs to apply and request the university to allow him or her some other 4 years to complete research. So that can exceed beyond what? The time provided. Then at least there should be sufficient data that can enable you to conduct this research, so that there is sufficient data again. If we came up with a problem statement about health, for example, and you are a teacher and you're investigating about how to eliminate malaria using some herbs, then that problem may not be within your skills. So the problem statement has got to be within the skill set, the skills of the researcher. Otherwise, unless you have identified it and then you are forwarding it to, you're using experts in that field to enable you create a better understanding of that research. So these are some of the qualities of a good research. The qualities of a good objective and the topic, we have already summarized them under SMART, but there are also other qualities you could look at. So our other sessions, we shall be looking at some aspects in other sessions which which sessions will have session 1 and 2. For example, session 1, we'll look at this session. The other session corresponding to this, we look at how to create a problem statement, and each one of you will need to create a problem statement after the guidance on how to create one. Of course, you have had in our this session, you've had how a problem statement can be framed, yeah, under our research processes. And this one will be specifically on how to create a research question. Then you also learn to create a topic, the conceptual framework, the research questions. You'll also learn to the research objectives, the research questions and hypotheses. That will be that is a session. Now that is in practice. The student should be able to come up with his or her own topic, the conceptual framework, research objective, and also research questions and their hypotheses. That's now in practice. Everybody coming up with the personalized work. Then if you have learned to do this, usually this makes up make part of in a research proposal, this make part of chapter 1 called introduction. They are part of it. But then they also have to have another session which we call session 3 for the briefs of methodology. In here, you need to have studied for this session, to have studied research designs. You need to also have studied the population and sample size. Then you also need to study sampling techniques and make those different sampling techniques so that you can select from them to apply in your study. Then the data collection methods, which data collection method can I use? Why to use that data collection method, not the other? Because in proposal writing and in research dissertation, those are essential. Those are essential aspects. The others you may also look at can be the briefs for literature review. This literature review makes chapter 2 of the research proposal and the dissertation. And that this one makes chapter methodology makes chapter 3. Chapter 1 is introduction, chapter 2 is literature review, chapter 3 is methodology. So you will see the relevance of literature review. You also see the literature including literature in our research following the APA style. This is called in-text citations and drawing reference, which we call referencing, creating references which are consistent with what we've cited in our literature. Some students call them quoting, but we call it citation. You cite that maybe Job 2022 said this and said, presented that this is that called citation. Then the referencing is the detail of the citations. Which book, what is the title, on what page, who published it, in which city. That's referencing. And the authors. Then we also see debating literature. This is important for practical writing of literature review. Yes, we shall agree on the time of having session 2, session 3. Mostly these ones you can do some further investigations, but we can also prepare for you a session for it. But these two are essential. Yeah, that is the end of this session.